This is me getting inspired by my Celtic Welsh heritage and just hanging out in my magical woods. So, how's all my middle pathers doing? It's getting crazy. The ride's getting crazier. And this is, I think, the big final piece of the puzzle that I was fortunate enough to figure out by listening to Terrance McKenna, who had done a lot of research on psychedelics, DMT, and the magical realm of plants. And through my discovery from listening to him, I've been able to connect a lot of understanding about the tree of life. And the two paths are relating to the tree of life, whether you want to be on the top part of the tree and be the fruit, or do you want to be on the bottom part of the tree, like your root ball and your vagus nerve being the roots of the tree. And this all goes into the mythos of Santa Claus, surprisingly enough. It has a big connection to also my last video with the nectar of the gods, and that relating to the fruit, the hanging fruit on the tree. So it goes into the mythos of two constellations in the sky, which is the Fly Bee constellation right next to the Carina ship. So there's a lot of information to go through. This video might be a little long, but I'm going to try to get it all done in one piece so it all kind of ties in everything we've learned up to this point. Now, I came across this information by listening to a lecture from Terrance McKenna, who was a professor who was studying shamanic experiences of taking DMT and psychedelics, mushrooms, and analyzing them and kind of figuring out the different visions that people got from taking different types of plants. Okay, so he was a professor, and he mentioned this book in one of his lectures. And this is a book that was written in the 1970s called The Sacred Mushroom and the Cross. And the author was John Marco Allegro, and he actually lost his job for writing this book because it threatened Christianity, because he was saying that the worshiping of Jesus was really the worshiping of this mushroom. Okay, now I know that sounds absolutely insane when you first hear it, but I'm going to prove how this all ties into the tree of life. Now this the mushroom's called Amanita muscaria, and if you notice, it's a red mushroom with white dots on it, and this is the mushroom that they use in the Alice in Wonderland story. Now, the whole reason the book was written was because of this fresco painting that was in southern France about the Garden of Eden with Eve there and the serpent is wrapped around this tree, and it looks like a mushroom. Okay, but the academics in history and anthropology say that it's a pine tree. But to me, it also looks like a mushroom. Now, Allegro was a professor. He also studied the Dead Sea Scrolls. But of course, in here, they're saying that John C. King detailed a rebuttal against his work. Okay, and his conclusion was, he concludes that if the theory were true, the use of mushrooms must have been the best kept secret in the world. And it was so well concealed for 2,000 years. Now, there's also a picture of back a mosaic with a big bowl of red mushrooms tied to Christianity. So I don't think it's as bizarre as, they're trying to make it out to be. So here's a bowl of mosaic of red mushrooms found in the Christian basilica in northern Italy in 330 AD. And this all ties into the Eleusinian mysteries, where the scholars believe that they were doing like afterlife rituals, and this all ties into psychedelics. And Terrance McKenna believes it was the mushroom. They have the Alice in Wonderland sculpture in the Central Park in New York. And if anybody's watched some of my old videos, I was explaining how the Alice in Wonderland story is all in the sky through the constellations. And what's interesting is these Siberian cultures would drop these hallucinogenic mushrooms out in December as gifts, and they were always found underneath pine trees. And I'm going to leave a little clip about Terrance McKenna speaking about this and how it all relates, to Christmas. And these mushrooms in like Norway and Finland are always used in celebration for Christmas. So there is a huge tie to this red and white mushroom relating to Christmas, and the colors of Santa Claus also being red and white. It's known as a fly agaric because they used it as a mixture and mashed it up with milk, and it would keep flies away. And this is how it connects to the fly bee constellation next to the ship, which is called Muscara, which is what this name of this mushroom is. It's called Amanita muscaria. So it's musca with the caria for the ship, which is carina. So the two words of the bee and the, fly bee and the ship are created in the name of the mushroom. So this is what I'm saying, this gnosis esoteric knowledge is through everything. It's like intertwined through our science, our language. It's always there. There's always a hidden meaning to the etymology of the word. And the interesting part of the first part of the word of the mushroom is Amanita, which is amen. Okay, so this goes back to the mythos of this book that was written saying that it was really worshiping Jesus, but it's really a mushroom. And I'm going to show you how it really is a mushroom. One of my friends from Northern Europe sent me this picture, and they're chopping down the mushrooms, but they have pine cone heads, which all goes back to the pine tree and the pineal gland. Terrance McKenna is going to explain the connection to Santa Claus and this mushroom.
And, you don't have to take it very seriously, because rationalism, the philosophy that gives us permission to deny the invisible world, you know who founded the philosophy of rational materialism? Any takers? Aristotle was early. I think I'd give credit to René Descartes for modern materialism and rationalism. Well, you know who told René Descartes to found rationalism and materialism? An angel. Are you ready for this? This is a suppressed history episode in the history of human thought. Here are the facts, folks. 1619. René Descartes is 21 years old. He's a young Frenchman in search of adventure. He joins a Habsburg army that is going off to Prague to lay siege to Prague to put down an alchemical revolt there. They kick butt on these alchemists, win the war, and they're on their way back to France. And in September 1619, this French army camped at Ulm in southern Germany. Some of you may know Ulm as Einstein's hometown, and in fact, that figures in our story obliquely, as you will see. This French army camps at Ulm, and René Descartes hits the hay, and in the middle of the night, an angel appears to this young man in the radiance of his rooms and says, the mastery of nature is to be achieved through number and measure. Modern science is founded, folks, right there, right then, by an angel. So how far away are the informing voices? How rational is rationalism? How material is materialism? All of you must know, I'm sure, the famous story of Kekule, the German chemist Kekule, who discovered the benzene ring. He was struggling with this problem in physical chemistry, could not figure it out, fell asleep in his study, and the Ouroboros serpent appeared before him in his dream and took its tail in its mouth. And he came out of a sound sleep and said, "I've got it." He walked to the blackboard, he drew the first benzene ring. Angelic intervention from the unconscious. So the point of all this is to suggest that human history is completely interpenetrated by the peculiar, the non-human, that which has intentionality and affection for mankind, for humanity. And this is what shamans call to their aid. This is how the curing is done. It's done through these spirit helpers, they're called, elementals. And so far as I know, Jungianism is the only modern intellectual position where you can even raise this issue without having a net dropped over you. I mean, this is absolutely forbidden by the modern worldview. And yet it lies very, very close to the surface in our culture. I mean, as an example of how close to the surface it lies in our culture, consider for a moment Santa Claus. What's this about? Santa Claus is the master of the elves. The elves that he is master of are demon artificers. They make toys for the world's children in their vast underground toy shops. And where are these underground toy shops? At the North Pole. I don't have to tell a room full of Jungians that the North Pole is the axis mundi, Yggdrasil, the magic world ash, the center of the mandala. What are the colors of Santa Claus? Red and white, the colors of Amanita muscaria. Absolutely. What is the titulary animal of Santa Claus? Reindeer. Reindeer are very central to the Amanita muscaria cult because reindeer eat the mushroom and then excrete their urine, and this is thought to be a cleaner and easier way to take the mushroom than to take it on the so-called first pass. The second pass is after the reindeer have had it. Just an anecdotal aside, if you're ever in the Yakut Basin, one of the great perils of the intoxicated Amanita user is to crawl out of the yurt in the middle of the night to take a leak in the snow, and before you can back off, the reindeer come and knock you headlong because they want to get to this Amanita-flavored snow. So here is Santa Claus right in the center of our culture, and when you take it apart, all the motifs are there. The demon artificers, the elves, the cosmic axis, the magical flight. I mean, it's a beautiful example of the preservation of pagan psychedelic use into a modern context. What can we say about this? Oh, well, I know. One more thing I wanted to say about it. This program that these tykes are pushing is a language skills program. And we don't know how long people have been bursting into this place. This may be the source of language. Where did language come from? We learned it from elves in hyperspace. Is as good a possibility as any other, and this is still ongoing. This language reformation program, they want us to activate our language forming ability. And language in the DMT flash, as I said this morning, it's something beheld. Syntax is something potentially to be looked at, not to be heard. And we don't understand this because for us, language is something that you hear. We can't imagine a language that you see. But have you ever noticed the way in which we preserve clarity of intention in language with verbal metaphors? We say, I see what you mean. He painted a picture. It means we unconsciously believe that truth will be beheld. And some of you who are students of the ancient literature may know Philo-Judaeus, Hellenistic Alexandrine Jew, absolute contemporary of Christ, born before, died after. And in one of his treatises on the Logos, which he was always talking about, Philo-Judaeus presents an etymology of the word Israel, talking about the word Israel. And he says, Israel means he who sees God. This is the meaning of the word Israel. And then he goes on to say, this he who sees God, he's talking about that, and he says, what would be the more perfect logos? Now, I should assume most of you know the logos was an informing voice, a voice in the head, which was the sine qua non of Alexandrian spirituality. Socrates had it, Plato had it, the logos. So Philo-Judaeus asks, what would be the more perfect logos? And then he answers his own question. He says, the more perfect logos would go from being would go from being heard to being beheld without ever crossing over a noticeable moment of transition. Well, that is precisely what you encounter in deep psychedelic experiences and the DMT flash. You behold the logos. In the initiation of the experience, you don't behold it. You hear it. It sounds, in Michael Harner's wonderful phrase, like the sound of rushing water, or like the sound of tinkling bells, and it's very far away. And then it begins to come closer. You begin to form a picture of it in your mind the way you would form a picture of a Nepali marching band if you just heard it about a half mile away, and the pa pa, and it's getting bigger, coming closer. This is the elf parade, and when it finally comes into view, it actually goes, without ever passing over a noticeable moment of transition, from being heard to being seen, through the phenomenon of approach. You hear it before you see it, then you see it far away, then you see it very close, and when you see it very close, who cares what it sounds like, because you're seeing it. This more perfect logos is what the tykes, the spiritual helpers, want to teach. And I think that it's important to spend a little time on this, because I think this would have tremendous historical impact upon our situation if we could, by hook or by crook, create a more visible logos, a language which could be seen. You've probably all considered at some time or another, what would telepathy be like? And I think most people answer that question by thinking that telepathy would be for me to hear what you think. But how would it be if telepathy were for me to see what you mean?
Amazing mind. I'll drop the link to the lecture in the description. Okay, so this is how I want to link it to the sky. Then you see the Muska. This is the bee constellation, but they ended up calling it a fly. Interestingly enough, the Musca borealis was the original fly bee constellation that was right beside the I Am Aries constellation, which is the crown, which is ruled by Mars, which is the sun pillar on the cardinal cross, which is, I feel, is like the high pillar, the high cross. It's the I Am. Okay, but there's the bee was there originally. Then they, scrapped that and then put it over by the Carina ship, and then they decided to call it a fly instead of a bee. Everything's about the bee. You got to remember the moon rules Cancer, and there's a beehive cluster there, which is really the manger of Jesus in the sky. Okay, it's always about the bees and the honey. There's a honey pot on top of the Carina ship. And if you haven't watched my last video about the Carina ship and how it's named after the ventilators for Corona, it's also two places in our bodies. We have Carina in our bladder and also Carina up in our trachea where the ventilator goes. And also the Lamb of God is the ram. This is what it is in the Glastonbury town where they have all the zodiac all mapped out through different parts of their town. So it's all connected to this bee, this fly, which relates to the mushroom. And of course, this honey is really the nectar of the gods that gets harvested from humans. I have it circled here. It's right on the back end of Centaurus. And you see the crux there. The crux is the Southern Cross. It's actually called the False Cross. And the musca is the little, you can hardly see it, but it looks like a fly. And that's, there's the ship, the Carina ship, the honey pot on top. There's the Antilla beside the honey pot, which is the wind pump. And then Canopus is the lodestar that Michael Pence talks about all the time. He's mentioned it maybe at least half a dozen times, the lodestar, because this is what this is all about, the lodestar. It's all about going up into this ship of fools that the Grateful Dead sings about. Actually, one of my clients told me about this, and then I looked it up, and there's tons of bands that have their own song called The Ship of Fools. And no coincidence, the Ship of Fools album or song has the Mars Hotel on top of it. Also in the lyrics, it talks about floating. The reason Trump always goes to Mars and Moon Township is because Mars, Aries, the Lamb of God, and Moon, Cancer, where the manger of Jesus is on the cardinal cross. He also has a Space Force symbol as the pentagram, which relates to Venus, and the five-pointed star of Earth and Venus conjunctions, which is on the American flag. Oh boy, and he got mocked for this one. For all the money we are spending, NASA should not be talking about going to the moon. We did that 50 years ago. They should be focused on the much bigger things we are doing, including Mars, of which Moon is part of. Defense and science. Okay, so they just like tore the threads on that one because, it's like they're like, the moon's nowhere near Mars, but I know what it means. Do you know what it means? The pentagram symbol is an X, which is for resurrection. And this is the number 24. It's the 24th letter, which relates to the chromium, which happens to be the exact same symbol as the Grateful Dead. The thing about chromium is it comes from rubies, and this ties into the Wizard of Oz and her being sucked up with her ruby slippers and falling asleep in the poppy field, which relates to the Queen of Heaven of the harvest, which is Cassiopeia, which has to do with poppies, and it's a field of snow with poppies in it, and this is because it happens at the winter solstice, well, on Christmas. It all goes back to Christmas. Okay, and poppies relates to memory and remembering. You can go back and watch that really long video I did called Don't Be Alice. The chromium's in there and explaining how this all relates to the ruby slippers and also the rainbow. Chromium has to do with the rainbow. That's why we have chrome on the computer. It's very important part of the thing because it's about ascension, chromium. And the Grateful Dead symbol is here, with the wings and the skull. And you want to be gratefully dead because you want to be reborn. That's what Ascension is. You're reborn. There's a reason why the Vatican has a keyhole monument outside their building, and also, you know, we know the roof looks like a snake, but the keyhole is relevant to the Carina ship. Okay, so here's the whole Alice in Wonderland story. Okay, so you go in the ship. There's actually a keyhole nebula in the ship at the beginning there, quite close to the Musca. And there's a keyhole. Of course, Alice in Wonderland has a keyhole. Then there's also a nebula called the Little Man Nebula. Okay, so that's in the ship. And then when you come out of the ship that's being pulled by the wolf and the Sirius star, then there's the rabbit, Lepus, and then you go down the Eridanus rabbit hole at the bottom. There's the clock. And you get a pin in your head as you go down this thing because you're being harvested, AI. Then you lose your phoenix, which is your soul. It flies away, and then you get the sculpture stone head, okay, because you've looked at Medusa head, which is between the horns of Taurus. There's the head of Medusa over there, and you stare at her, you turn into a stone head, okay, because you go back down you float back down to earth after you've been harvested. That's what the whole floating symbolism is about. It's not just floating up, you float back down is the symbolism. Are you actually going to float up in the sky? I have no idea. All I know is there's lots of symbolism with black holes and wind tunnels, and this is how the language is created, which what Terrance McKenna was talking about. It's done through symbolism. It's done through, I see what you mean. So this is why symbolism is everywhere, because our subconscious can pick up the symbols. Now, if you can let your mind expand enough to believe that there's an underlying hidden esoteric knowledge through everything, and that you need to see it through symbols and not be told it through, somebody telling you it and teaching it to you, then you're going to start to see it. Okay, I don't know why I can see it. I'm not sure why. I think it's probably because I haven't been educated academically in high education, and my ability to see things through symbolism is more attuned than through verbal. As you can tell the way I speak, I don't have great pronunciation because I find that I've never practiced that a lot. I've always connected with nature and animals, and I've always used vision to communicate with animals and to envision what I need. Now, a very important constellation is Citus. You can see Uranus is there. It's in Aries. This will be happening on Christmas Eve. And the importance of this is because the moon will be on the eye of that whale. It's considered a whale, like a sea monster, and that's what Perseus was trying to destroy. And that's the mythos of that constellation. But I'm going to go into a little bit of different mythos about this constellation and how I know that this is going to happen on Christmas Eve, because it's part of the mythos of the wind. This constellation has reference to the wind and the island where the harvested souls go. And the moon will be on the eye of the beast, which is actually in the constellation Aries, the Lamb of God, exactly on midnight. Well, we can say it's at the 23rd hour and 45 minutes, because this ties into a scripture in the Bible as well. The fact that it's 23 is really interesting because it's 5 for Pent, but also it is the 23rd letter in the alphabet, which is the W, and Cassiopeia, the queen of heaven, the queen of the harvest, is the constellation looks like a W. Okay, so we have the 23rd hour looking like the W, and then the 45. I just thought that was interesting because Trump is the 45th president. So it's all tied into the Bible that the veil will be divided in two. There will be two realities at this point. The people that get harvested and go up and float, and then the people that get the Spirit of God and get the 144,000 frequency that activates your DNA and gets the seal on your forehead. And the reason that I do believe it's again at midnight on Christmas Eve is because if you take 24 and the 12th month, which goes to 36, and you times 36 by the year 2020, which is 4, it comes to 144. So the numerology and the gematria and the biblical and the mythos of the constellations are all tied in because the planets are all in the right spot. We have Saturn and Jupiter in conjunction on Saturnalia festival in Saturn's house of Capricorn that has not happened for over 2,400 years. Okay, so this is extremely important this Christmas. And the numerology coming from March 9th, 1989 is when we had the last corona mass ejection, and I'll talk about that later. And the numerology comes to 1111, same as the moon cycles that are also 1111. We've got 11 double October full moons on the 1st and the 31st, which is this month, and that's the 11th time that's happened since the founding of the United States. And we've also had 11 new moons on October 1st and Halloween since the founding of the United States. So we're on the 1111 cycle, and there's an 1111 there with the corona mass ejection. Saturn is Cronus. He's considered to be keeper of the chronological time. So time changes with Saturn, and he is the god of the golden age. That's why the veil will split in two to create these two realities, depending if you want to be the root of the tree of life or the fruit of the tree of life. Now, in this Musca Apis, fly bee constellation, it has a nebula in there called the coal sack, also referring to Christmas. Santa Claus brings you coal in a little sack, right? He gives you a piece of coal in your sack, in your stocking. So this goes back to Aboriginal astronomy with Australian Aboriginals, and they were worshiping this nebula because they were doing this ritual with Bora rings. Now, Bora rings are like ring circles in the ground, but they were using 2 ring circles, so almost like the Vesica Pisces again, which is, to do with where Jesus sits in, but it also has to do with the Bardo, which is in Buddhism. So it has the 2 rings. So I found that really fascinating that, it's all tying into the Christmas mythology as well. Well, the last season of the 100 show on Netflix, with the 7th season, they all have their Phoenix shirts on, but they're at the Bardo, which is all to do with the service to the greater good, service to all mankind. And of course, they're all wearing the masks. Does not look familiar. This is the Bardo, is the all to do with the Book of the Dead. So the whole funny part about the 100 show is that they get floated, and then eventually it's she says to the guy that ends up trying to be Christ, she ends up killing him. She's the moon, right? And she kills the fixed cross sun, and she says to him, "Go float yourself." Pretty funny, but it's all relating to what's happening in this reality that we're in right now. And, it's all about ascension. And interesting enough, it even ties to Canopus, back to the lodestar in the ship. They called it the Macula Magellani. And this is magnetic clouds. There's magnetic clouds underneath the ship. So I think, considering like it's like symbolism for like the ball salts like that are on Easter Island, you know, all those statues that are, the bodies are buried in the ground, that the ball salt is magnetic. And I think they bury themselves in the ground to say, don't float, you know, stay grounded. You don't want to be sucked up. So again, the corona borealis. It's interesting that these Aboriginals call it the Bora rings. That has etymology, I'll get to. But the interesting part is the corona borealis is the crown, but it's on top of the Ophiuchus doorway, which I've always said is the Freemason doorway to get out of here, because you have to control that snake energy without getting burnt. Okay, so when you're at the Golden Gate, Sagittarius also has a corona on its chest. It's a Corona Australis constellation, and this one has to do with harvesting. It has to do with the Semele, which is Dionysus's mother, which she's like the harvest queen, same as Cassiopeia. They have very many different names. It's always this hierarchy woman that is doing the harvest, okay, all through all the ages, all the mythos. It goes back to Cabela and Cabeli, and her name was also Cybele, or in this case, Semela, which is the honey, Mela. Okay, so now this, you know, constellation Ophiuchus has a blue sapphire on the top. It's also known as the moth. So you get, you know, you keep your wings. It's also the moth that goes into the flame, so that you kind of get, you know, burnt, which is all the symbolism is you go into the flame, you take on the heat of this energy that comes up through the planet. I'm assuming it's a corona mass ejection that goes into the planet. And then that's why it's called coronavirus, because this is going to happen and this is going to come up our bodies, and then you transcend and your third eye opens, you know, through this experience. Or there's a big wind tunnel at the same time, and you go up and you get harvested and you become the top part of the tree of life. So this is what it all goes back to. And I just want to go into some of the etymology of the word Bora and Borealis. I forgot to mention Ophiuchus is really the mother goddess constellation. It used to be a woman holding the snake. It's all the snake goddess women from the Minoan Creek Island, which is where Melania Trump's heritage comes from. These are like Amazon women, strong women. They're the seraphim women that didn't really need men. They were like looking after themselves. And this all ties back to the Mother Earth is really the mother goddess. Okay, so it goes back to this more to do with paganism, where it was worshiping the woman, the moon pillar, which is the cardinal cross, rather than the sun pillar on the fixed cross is what we're in. So the fixed cross is kind of like crumbling, it's falling apart. And then some people will go mutable cross, where Jupiter rules the two pillars, hence the Olympic symbol in 2024 when the second eclipse goes through. And then you're hung upside down because Jupiter is on your root chakras. Okay, so you're hung up upside down on that pillar. But the cardinal cross, you know, you're going to be I am to feel. Okay, fixed cross is I love the sun. I love to enjoy, which is sexual. That's why everything's so sexual on this realm. And then the mutable cross, which is the AI lockdown, you're kind of like comfortably numb, is I can too believe. So they always, if you put the two in on each one, and two has a different meaning, but it's, we've referenced the two pillars, okay? So it comes out like you can kind of get a gist of where it's going. You know, and this is all part of it. It's all to do with astrology into religion. It's all connected. And 24 being Jupiter, super important. 24 is also Iusis, which is Jesus in Hebrew. This is the exact number of days between the two eclipses across the United States, creating the Venus pentagram, part of the X of the Venus, which is crossing at the Silver Archway, which is also the Silver Gate, which is ruled by Venus in Taurus. We have Washington the Silver Gate at St. Louis, on the Y of the river, of the confluence of the rivers joining, which we have the X and the Y, which relates to DNA. We have the Golden Gate, all on the same parallel line, right angle up, Freemason right angle, straight up to the Lions Gate in Vancouver. All part of the ritual of this harvest. And of course, the two eclipses have significant. The one that went through in 2017 was kind of like the harvest eclipse. The one that goes through in 2024, it runs through Phoenix, which is Phoenix is your soul. This is going to be the Ascension one. This is when Jesus will come back to free everybody. There's exactly 2424 days in between, but we're exactly on the halfway point on December 14th this year, which makes it 12/12, which brings us to the number 24. Okay, so 7 days later, we're into the winter solstice, and then 3 days after that, we're at Christmas, right? So it's all, the whole dates, it's all being preset. You know, this is all being done because they knew it was going to happen, and they made the monuments, they made everything. So for those that can see, will see, and for those that are ready to leave this duality, slave realm, will be set free. Now, this is the tribulation because it's 7 years between these two eclipses, and this is why we're at the halfway mark and everything's starting to get crazy. This pentagram goes up to Bird Sanctuary Island. You want to be like the bird path, but birds don't get sucked up. Like, you know, like Trump said, wind kills birds. That's why he always says that with the wind. The energy, he goes, it kills the birds, you know, so you don't want to be sucked up. And so this is how it all goes. They say what's going to happen, but unless you know the story, you can't find the, you know, you can't see what's going on. But you have to learn your history so that you know really what's happening, because history repeats itself. Everything's about Venus, and you can see Venus, you know, she has the, you know, Space Force logo in the middle of the pentagram, but also the top part of the pentagram that's a triangle upside down, right? The big triangle has the arms. This is the water symbol. This is like for the moon pillar. Okay, so she's the moon pillar. This is cardinal cross. Now, they made the United States all to do tied to Venus, the founding of the United States, because in 1639, on July 4th, there was this really rare Venus transit. And exactly 1,639 months later, on July 4th, they founded the United States. Okay, so everything is about this ritual. And they knew that these two eclipses were going to be going across at that location, and that's why they created all the monuments accordingly. You also have a phi line in this triangle that relates to water, actually, but it goes from St. Louis, Silver Archway, up to Winnipeg, and this creates the phi line. This I'll talk about it later about what this all means, but interesting, like it's like all perfect. There's this big giant Freemason building there. Now, I wanted to talk about the etymology of boar, like borealis for aurora borealis. There comes a fawn, it's the food of the beast. Okay, so everything about aurora borealis has to do with the corona borealis, which is in the north, on the top part of the zodiac. It's north, not the southern corona crown. Of course, it says also for the mountain, those living beyond the mountain, which has to do with the axis mundi of the tree of life that always goes up to the north, with North Pole, with Santa. This all has to do with being beyond the veil. Okay, so you want the borealis corona crown. We also have at the point of Vancouver, not in Vancouver, in Winnipeg, in Canada, there's the big Freemason building that has the black star down the bottom. It's the legislative building, has the golden boy on top with the wings, and he's pointing north. So north is, you know, where all the focus goes to, right? Especially with Santa Claus at the North Pole as well. I just wanted to show you the axis mundi, tree of life. You can see how it's like a mountain around an ice wall around it. So this is like all to do with the North Pole and the hyperbola of the center of the earth, and then you know, it's like a toroidal field. It's kind of, that's the imagery of that. I want to go back and talk about the mushroom a bit. This is explaining the relationship to the Musca constellation, the fly, with the fly agaric. And yeah, they're just saying that that's how it's linked to it. And here it's talking about, it's also called the Alice in Wonderland syndrome. Haha. This has to do with the effects of it. They also, some shamanic rituals where they would eat it and then they would give out their urine to help their tribes. Okay, so there's all many shamanic healers that were doing this, you know, and there's also the reindeer liking to eat them as well. So we have a lot of interesting stuff. The Sami in the far north for the use of shamanic rituals also used it. Yeah, so it's always up in the far north. I guess it was pretty strong. That's why they just gave it to the shaman healer, and then they would drink the urine to kind of dilute it. It's all here saying, and even the word berserk comes from the rages, I guess, if you can't handle it. So yeah, and they also drank the wealthy people that were able to eat the mushrooms, and so the poor people would just drink the urine because it was cheaper. But this was a big part of spiritual ritual because you could go through the veil and see the other side, the spirit world. Okay, so this is where it all goes back to spirituality, and I guess it ties into esoteric Christianity way, 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 way back. The large number of fungi infects the roots of plants by forming an association with plants called mycorrhizal. Okay, so this has to do with, it's like they need each other, and it has to do with phosphorus. So it says here about 90% of land plants rely on mycorrhizal fungal, especially for mineral nutrients, phosphorus, and in return, the fungus receives nutrients from the plant. And during winter, when the day length is shortened and exposed to sunlight is reduced, some plants produce few or no nutrients, and this depends on fungi for sugars. So see, the fungi keeps the plants alive. And this is how the whole tree of life works. And the phosphorus, which is coming from urine, okay, is really why that's the nectar of God, of the gods. It's going to end up replenishing the low phosphorus levels on this planet. That this is what the harvest is about. That's why the planet is kind of like suffering right now, like we're not looking after it, and then, you know, everything is getting depleted. So this is why this event has to happen. It's not nefarious, even if you think of it on a spiritual level. You could say, oh, we're locked down on this planet. There's some weird dimensional beings that are, controlling us. Maybe so, but it's all tied together to keep this planet alive. Okay, so if you're on the mutable cross and you're going into the harvest, you're actually doing the planet a favor. It's not like, oh, you're dumb and you're stupid and you shouldn't be going that route. It's actually your service to others. You're totally giving up your soul for 3.5 years to be able to do this. Because you cannot see the truth, this is the path you will be led on. Now, phosphorus is white, but nitrogen is also needed. This refers to the word night, which is dark. And, we need phosphorus and we need nitrogen to be able to grow plants. It's all part of it. And I was talking to somebody and they said Kali phosphorus is actually the I am, the Aries, the Lamb of God, which we go back to Kali, which is the destroyer, but she's also the rebirth, and she has her tongue hanging out, which is the breath of fire that you use to create energy in your body and open up your heart chakra. So none of it's really nefarious, right? Because people start thinking like, oh, CERN's nefarious. It has the Shiva symbol. It's the Kali. She's the destroyer. CERN's going to destroy us. But everything is bipolar on this planet. So if you think it's evil, that's what you're resonating with. That's the path you're going to pull yourself to. If you believe that maybe CERN is opening up the dimensions and put the veil between, then you're going to be thinking of it more in a positive way. So you have to watch where your thoughts go, because wherever your thoughts go, That's the path you're creating for yourself. And the number of the beast, 666, is actually 6 protons, 6 electrons, and 6 neutrons that create man. And it's all science. It's all esoteric science on how to ascend. Because they add up to 18, and 8 and 1 is 9, which is like the golden ratio, which goes back to the plant life because everything grows from golden ratio. So many plants grow in that beautiful spiral. It all relates to 369 because everything breaks back down to 9 or down to 3, which is the Trinity. And this all refers also to Cancer constellation, which is a 6 and a 9. So when you start seeing 666 as evil, you're not getting the full picture of what it all represents, okay? 6 and 9s are just mirror images of themselves in this duality world. Yin yang, male, female. Everything is about us, okay? So we even have in our brain the muscarinic receptors homologue, okay? Partly because of the muscle activating function, but also because of its function in the autonomic nervous system and the brain. So we have the whole mushroom, we have etymology in our brain named after it, okay? So there's drugs to treat certain heart conditions and eye problems, which acts mainly on the muscarinic receptors in the brain, can cause delirium and amnesia. So I think that this mushroom will most likely be mixed with the urine, which will create the purple rain, because it's phosphorus ends up being a luminescence. Like it has a glow to it, has different colors to it. It can be red, it could be green, well, green, blue, so, and also purple. It has this ability to have colors, okay? Phosphorus does. So it starts off white, but then when it's mixed with water, it becomes different colors. So anyhow, I really think that the urine in Aquarius, when it pours down out, is actually the purple rain that Prince sings about. And this is what's going to free people out of their comfortably numb, lockdown reality of being in smart cities, coronavirus nightmare. And then they're going to activate their DNA. So they're going to awaken out of their kind of, state, 5G state, and with their, vaccine that's kind of locking them to 5G. And then they're going to awaken, but they're also going to lose their memory, because the people that get harvested have no memory of the event, okay, because they have to play the game again. So when we come back and do the whole game all over again, they have no memory. They're kind of washed in the river Lethe. We're washed in the Nemosin River, where we get to keep our memory. Okay, that's what the water is all about. Water refers to memory, right? Because it has, water holds memory. They just discovered that, but that's why it's always the rivers. The rivers has to do with whether they wash away your memory or you get to keep it. Now, the nectar of the gods is always referred to as wine in many cases, sometimes ambrosia, sometimes mela, but it's called the muscatel wine, and its etymology is hidden again. So your memory is hidden. Here they're also saying that the receptors affect memory and control posture. Okay, so it all goes back to the queen, right? The queen bee, which was originally what Mascara constellation represented, was the bee. Now, the spelling is always KWE for queen. And this, it has relevance to also Quetzalcoatl. Now, Quetzalcoatl was a fiery feathered serpent from the Aztecs, and he relates to wind and Venus, and this is relevant. Venus of the dawn, so this is also the Phosphorus. The morning star relates to the dawn, okay? So what else is interesting about it? In French, it means Q, it means tail. So when I started to dig around about the meaning of Q, it's the feathered tail. Okay, so it relates to a bird that never is able to get pregnant and have a baby in captivity. They're saying it means stand up, like tail feathers that stand up. So I think that's why the peacock is used as well. But it also has traditions for liberty, right? And it dipping its chest in warrior prince's blood. And the bird has acquired a distinctive red chest feathers. So this bird is really, really sacred, and they're not allowed to kill the bird. And if you know if you find a feather from this bird because it has this long tail, it's very, very important. Now the Kula means moon. So we go back to the moon and the feminine aspect of the moon, but relating to Cancer and the whole thing about the manger of Jesus being the beehive cluster all goes back to the serpent that happens to relate to wind and to Venus again. See how it's all intertwined. Even the word ambiguity, omnipresence, goes back to the Q again. So the QWE or the QUE, and it's referencing Christ. So I started thinking about, well, what do they reference the etymology to Quebec meaning? And it says where the river narrows. So it's like the narrow path, which I find really funny. They don't mention anything about, the Q being the bird, but we have the bird through James Bay. It looks like a bird. And then they create hydro from there. And that's the Hydra snake. They named it after the snake, hydra, it's water, right? But I find that all fascinating. Well, then you get to the etymology of bec, which can be beak, but it also means to shine. So we go back to the shining ones again, who have the phosphorus. And what's interesting is the second eclipse that goes across North America in 2024 passes right through Montreal and goes up to St. John's, Newfoundland, and then it goes all the way over the trajectory to Paris, where the Olympics is going to be, which happens to be where the Templars, the Knights of Templar, have their very original first church, which is in France. Okay, so this is how Quebec ties into it all, is because, I was saying that I do believe there's supposed to be a coronal mass ejection, a CME, that's going to cause this event to happen. But there was one in Quebec on March 9th, 1989. And what was fascinating about it is that there was an aurora borealis on the North Pole and also on the South Pole, on both poles. Okay, so it says extremely intense auroras at the poles. The auroras could be seen as far south as Texas and Florida. So it came right up from the poles, on the southern pole. And all the power went out from hydro. Okay, but it's interesting they have a reference here to the military, the UN, and the Australian Army. The Australian Army contribution to UN TAG was heavily reliant on the radio communications, and they were severely impacted. So all communications went down. So and the internet wasn't very big at that point. So all the internet will go down. All communications will go down if this event happens, if this CME event happens, if it's a big one like what we're expecting. If you listen to Suspicious Observer, he's talking about this all the time. He's mentioning the magnetic poles are moving like crazy fast. They're speeding up like all the time, and they're like moving towards the equator. So everything's changing on this planet, I think, for this event. And of course, what was a little suspicious for me was Wikipedia mentioned the UN, which has the laurel wreath as the corona australis, and they mentioned Australia. So, you see, everything's coded for you to see it if you have the eyes to see. And then the corona borealis, which is all about the aurora borealis, which means the northern wind, has to talk about the labyrinthine. There's this whole mythos about the labyrinthine. And it talks about the ship. She gets cast away on an island, and his ship sails off without her. So she doesn't go on the ship with this crown. Okay, she goes on an island where she's like, the whole Mount Zion, the the northern mountain beyond the wall. Okay, this is where you go with the corona borealis, not the other corona australis. Now, if you look where the X is, it's right at the North Pole. Okay, so they're mostly in the boreal regions, which is the northern hemisphere. They can also grow in fairy rings. They can grow under pine, oak, spruce, fir, birch, and cedar. But in Australia, they grow under silver birch. The fatal dose can be calculated up to 15 caps, but in North America, the Mycological Association says that there's no cases in the past 100 years of anybody dying from an overdose of a mushroom. So this is what a fairy ring looks like when the mushrooms grow in a ring, but sometimes there's no mushrooms. And I'm starting to think that these Bora Bora rings in Australia could be these mycorrhizal rings where the fungus is like, working in a way that is connecting, and it creates these rings. I'm wondering if the Olympic rings represent that. That would be crazy. Okay, so the birch tree is called Pentulo pendulum. Pendulum, being pentagon, actually goes back to the Phoenician alphabet, which is Beth. And this actually literally means house. So Bethlehem is like a house. And then, of course, the curly birch, when you cut it, it creates a V. But this is known in this one town. Now, the name of the town is Jyväskylä. I don't know if I'm saying that right. And this is in southern Finland. And this curly birch, the V, when you cut it, would represent Venus. It's creating the V again. Or it looks actually like the W, the harvest. So this town, the second part of the city's name is Kela, means the first part of the city's name, Java, I'm not sure how to say it, looks like the stem of the adjective Giovanni, derived from jiva, which is grain. So again, it's the harvest. And then it's also associated with taxu, the genus of ewes, an Old Prussian word, which is Jewess. So the ewes is the Jews. Oh, it's just crazy. It's I don't know, man. It's like everything's linked. So then the yew family tree has these red berries on it, and this is generally included with the other conifers in the order of the pinnacles. It's like pinnals. It's like your penal gland with your pine cone. And your DNA analysis has shown that these yews are phyologically nested in the pinnals. So yeah, so the pineal gland, that's why your pineal gland is your pine cone that's at the Vatican, is because of these red berries being the fruit. And this I did a little, tweet to William Moon, and he liked it. It's all about the red berries because he keeps going on about the trees, the mother tree and everything. So he's coding to the tree of life all the time about, which is referring to the harvest. He's like, I like it that he does that because it kind of confirms what all this research is leading us to. So this is what the pineal tree looks like. And the nectar of the gods, according to this music video, is the gold. Yeah, William Moon keeps going on about the babies. So these fir trees have abies, and they relate to the word fire. So it's fire. So you see how the wording is all hidden. The esoteric knowledge is all hidden in the names of these words and what they mean through the languages. So the abies is from the fir trees. So it's like you're the baby or the abi, but actually it means the alb, the ALB, which is to do with your white body, your enlightenment body. It goes back to the etymology. These ALB is the Elba. So white linen robe, barley meal, swan, which would be Cygnus, the northern cross. That's the path you want to take. You don't want to do the southern cross. That's the false cross. And then there's the cloud as well. So that's the path you want to go on, to the cloud, to heaven, not the ship, not the float. And this also means white, but also dawn. So the dawn goes back to the Phosphorus. This is the river's name, Elba. Scottish Gaelic name for Scotland, actually. Wow, I didn't know that. Okay, so we're missing a lot of phosphorus at this time period. They say 20 to 40 years the planet is going to starve unless we replenish it. Now, calcium phosphate is mostly rock and mostly be mined in Florida and North Africa and can be heated up to 1200, 1500 degrees Celsius with sand, which is mostly SeIO2, the coke. So coke, the word coke comes from this as well. Even underwater, white phosphorus is slowly converted to a more stable red phosphorus allotrope. I don't know enough about the science, but I just wanted to put it out there. Now, when exposed to oxygen, white phosphorus glows in the dark with a very faint tinge of green and blue. It is highly flammable and pyrophoric, so it's the word fire comes from it, and upon contact with air. So as soon as it's exposed to air, it combusts. So the odor of combustion of this form has a characteristic garlic smell, and samples are commonly coated with white phosphorus pent oxide. So we got the pent, the pentagram for Venus again. And here's some glowing fungi. It's the fungi. So by the 18th century, it was known that the pure oxygen phosphorus does not glow at all. There's only a range of partial pressures at which it does. Okay. So since its discovery, phosphorus and phosphorescence were used loosely to describe substances that shine in the dark without burning. Although the term phosphorescence is derived from phosphorus, the reaction that gives phosphorus its glow is popularly called chemiluminescence, glowing due to cold chemical reaction. So I find this interesting because of, Egypt used to be called Chem. We have the creme in Welsh, which means to blacken. So, and also, in Egypt it's to blacken. So I think it's like you blacken, but you don't really burn, but you actually become like you glow from this white substance. It's crazy. Interesting, they're using the number 32 and 33 as beta emitters for phosphorus, but it penetrates your skin in your cornea in your eye, ingested or inhaled or absorbed, or is readily incorporated into the bone and the nucleic acids. For this reason, they tell you to wear safety gloves when using it. Oh, and of course, they had to use the number 9, 9 phosphorus atoms in the chain. So they get the bone ash helps get phosphorus. So I'm wondering if that's why everybody's getting cremated now. It's helping with the phosphorus levels. And white phosphorus could then be made by heating these phosphates and mixed with the ground coal or charcoal in an iron pot and distilling the phosphorus vapor in a retort. So they can get this vapor from the bones, the bone ash. And also they get it from guano, which is bat poo. We were talking about they had the whole thing about the coronavirus relating to the bats. And then I realized, oh yeah, the bone structure in the coronavirus is called the carina, right? It was also in the bladder and also in our trachea, but they had it in the in the wings and the bones of the bats. It's called the carina as well. So it's relating to phosphorus, again, with the bats and tying into corona and the carina harvest ship. So we got the phosphorus, the corona, and the ship, all to do with bats. Okay, so Eros was this goddess. She's connected to, Venus because she's Eros Phosphor, which is Venus, which is the morning bringer, and who shines upon all that are on the earth and upon the darkness. The deathless gods who live in the whole heaven. Okay, so it's like they don't die, but she shines on us. It's the whole wide shining the bright sky. Okay, so this is Venus. That's how I want to just make sure you understood the link between Venus and Phosphorus. Now I'm going to show you why I totally believe it's going to happen at midnight on Christmas Eve, because the moon is in conjunction with Uranus, which is heaven, on the eye of Cetus, which is actually considered to be in the Aries, the Lamb of God constellation. You have Mars, the war, right between the Pisces, soles of your feet is Mars. It's like gives tons of energy, and it's the war planet, okay, right in the spiritual sign of Pisces. Not to mention the whole importance of the Saturn-Jupiter conjunction, right? But I'm just going to want to focus on the moon right now and Cetus, because I know this video is getting long, and the relevance of this constellation and the mythos relating to this constellation is extremely important. Now, the real mythos of Cetus is Perseus kills him to save Andromedon, which is Cassiopeia's daughter. Okay. Now, he also represents the whales. Okay, and the word squall. But a brief, sudden, violent storm to blow strongly for a brief period. This is why I think, because it relates to like a quick storm that happens with this whale. I do think it will happen for half an hour, this quick kind of like a plane door opening. It's going to be like a wind tunnel, and no gravity. And it's the sound of silence in the heavens. It's like everything stops, and then this big suction happens. You're going to see the aurora borealis. You're going to want to go outside. If there's a black hole that has a hypnotic sound, I did a video on that. It's like a little tapping sound, high-pitched sound, which I do believe is the sound, the singing of the sirens. And they take you to the depth of the sea. They pull you into the sea, which is what the whale does as well. He takes you down into the sea. Okay, so this is what this is all about, is this mythos about being taken away. So you want to stay home, stay safe. You want to make sure you don't get pulled out the windows. A lot of those music videos are showing the windows breaking and getting sucked out. I'm going to drop a whole playlist of music videos that you can go through now that you know the story of what I've been connecting here. You can watch the music videos and you'll see that it's all there, okay, especially if you read the lyrics as well. So that the whole goal is to stay calm, be able to breathe, because it will be hard to breathe for half an hour. Maybe get some oxygen so you can breathe. You might get a little nosebleed. Stay calm, block your ears, maybe play theta binary beats so you don't hear the sound. Have that on your phone. There won't be any power. And then we most likely will go into the 10 days of darkness with no power. Okay, so I just want to pre-warn everybody, because this is I'm 99% sure with all this mythos that it's going to happen on this Christmas. So back to the cell salts again with Cetus. He's referencing salt, also Kali, Kala, Kali, Hal. I think there was a computer named Hal, sorry, which means salt, salt is your salvation. It also means to breathe, okay? So to a brief, sudden, violent windstorm that doesn't last very long. So one legend about whales with a number of variations tells the sailors make a mistake that the whale is an island, and then it pulls them down when it goes down. So there's the mythos about that. There was a constellation called Machina Electricia, which has to do with electricity, right? Because that's what the spirit of God is. You have to be able to take this electric energy into your body. And it also close to the sculptor constellation, which is a stone head. If you can't handle this energy, you turn to stone. And Electra, or Electrids, is Amber Island that lies off the Padot. The Pados is the alternate name for the Po River, which is the Eridanus River in the sky. So the Po River across Europe all relates to the Eridanus River, which is actually the rabbit hole. Electra is also one of the seven sisters in the Pleiades. So they're coming to harvest, coming to harvest us, the Pleiades. They were always known as the Seven Sisters, and many cultures believe they were the birth of humanity was coming from that area of the sky. So mythology tells us that the amber originated from the tears shed by the Hyades that flowed into the river Eridanus. Okay, so it's like the souls that are crying because they've got captured. It's the amber. And then, and quickly the Argonauts, which is about the ship, entered the ship and toiled at their oars increasingly until they reached the sacred island of Electra, which is in the Pleiades, the highest of them all, near the river Eridanus. Okay, so there's a whole tie to the Pleiades now to this constellation Citus. Okay, you see how it all ties in. And then they're saying that it is a rainbow from decomposed. The light is decomposed into the color of the rainbows, and the Citus is not the rainbow itself. Electra. So as they're saying, Citus isn't the rainbow, but what they're doing is they're gathering the phosphorus to make the rainbow. To make the rainbow basically is this is where all this comes from. So yeah, I think Citus is like the island that sinks. It's really that you're the island that sinks. If you're the whale that takes you down to the depths of the sea. Right, and this island is identified with the Kvarner Islands in the Adriatic, okay, which is close to Croatia. So I did a little dig on this, and oh my God, you're gonna get, that's crazy what I found. Okay, so there's an island there called KRK. I don't know how to pronounce it, but in Italian it's called Veglia. Okay, but it relates to another place in Italy called Po Vegula, because Po is the Eridanus River. So they've connected the words, and you won't believe what happened on this island. But what's interesting, the Elbe, which instead of the A, there's an ELBE river in Europe, and it's actually in English they call it the Elve. So it's like the elven people again, but you see how it's all goes through this mountain with the spelling of KRK Onosis. So it's almost like Kenosis Mountains, Kernosis. I'm not sure the pronunciation, but this is all relating to this island again. Okay, so yeah, it's all to do with the elf world, the elven world. That's the North Pole. So this island has been uninhabited for centuries. In 1527, the Doge offered the island to some monks, and they refused. And from 1645, the Venetian government built 5 octagonal forts to protect and control the entrances to the lagoon. So it's on a lagoon, there's a lagoon Nubula on the Golden Gate where you get judged. And the Provilia Octagon is one of the 4 that still survive. So there's a Provilia, there's only one. It's called which is basically Eridanus. Okay, it's all relating to the Eridanus in the sky. Okay, so now in 1776, when it was founded in the United States, it became a checkpoint for all the goods of people coming and going. And in 1793, there was several cases of the plague on 2 ships, and consequently, the island was transformed into a temporary confinement station for the ill. And this role became permanent until 1805. And under the rule of Napoleon, who also had an old church destroyed there, and an old bell tower was converted into a lighthouse. The Lazaretto was closed in 1814, and the island was used as a quarantine station from 1793 to 1814. And in 1922, the existing buildings were converted into an asylum for the mentally ill, and later used as a nursing home for a long-term care facility. until the closure in 1968. And afterwards, the island was briefly used for agriculture and then completely abandoned. The whole place is abandoned. It's like you don't want to go to this place. And this is all to do with the mythos of Citus and the freaking rabbit hole with Alice in Wonderland, the Eridanus River. So here's a picture of it with the bell tower. So the surviving buildings on the island consist of a caravan, a church, a hospital, and an asylum, the bell tower, and the housing and the administrative buildings for the staff. The bell tower is most visible structure on the island and dates back to the 12th century, which reminds me of For Whom the Bell Tolls. Okay, the island contains one or more plague pits. So the people were buried there. Okay, and estimated, published in the National Geographic, suggested that 100,000 people died on this island over the centuries and were buried in the plague pits. So this is all about the plague, you know, with the coronavirus. Okay, so and then it gets even creepier. The doctor allegedly experimented on patients with crude lobotomies. According to various reports, most recently by the Travel Channel, the doctor jumped from the bell tower in the 1930s and he died. And then there's been ghosts. People think there's ghosts there. The place is being deserted because everybody's creeped out by the place. Yeah, and so they're saying it's has a haunted history. And Poveglia was also featured in the Alex Rider series of Anthony Horowitz as Malagoska, the main assassin training center for Scorpia. So it's like Scorpio, which is like part of the Golden Gate, like this whole mythos. When you go to the Golden Gate, you have Scorpio there is the dragon, and then you have your arrow from Sagittarius, which is your Corona Australia's crown from the UN. So. It's just crazy. So, like, you just don't want to go to this place. And this is what represents, that Alice in Wonderland path. And then this is where the moon is on this, right at the strike of midnight, like the Cinderella story. I just can't believe it. It's just like, I can't believe it's all tied together. Okay, so to tie it into our timeline now, this was, I don't know, something from the FBI. This girl got, abused, sexually abused, and she created this painting with all these people down below, the fire burning. And she has Trump sitting on an Amanita muscaria mushroom, which is like bizarro. Also, an obelisk on the right-hand side there that looks like the Saturn, hat, that Saturn's always known for his hat. The hat's on the obelisk. Okay, so we know that this obelisk has to do with this pilgrimage. It was in my last video about this, I think it's in Pakistan or India, where they go to this pilgrimage and they go into the nectar of the gods, and there's always the obelisk. So I'm like, okay, so is the obelisk, the mushroom? And I'm starting to think it is, because I found a mushroom that looks like an obelisk, and it's called Amanita muscaria. So there's two different types of Amanita muscaria. One that looks like a phallus, and the other one that is the red cap one that's in the Alice in Wonderland story. So all to do with the harvest. So the tree of life is a phallus mushroom. So there's a Chinese called Kanamera Masturi festival. It's in the spring, and it's about two young women the demon fell in love with, and bit off their penises of the two men on their wedding night. Okay, so then they had to replace the penis, and then it was published in the Island of Women. So it goes back to the the women island. It's all women ruling it, and the men don't have any penises. This is what this celebration is about, which kind of ties into the whole Osiris mythos, where he, got chopped up, but they couldn't find his penis, and then his wife had to make one, and that's how she had Horus. Okay, so it's always like there's a missing penis, but it's so funny. They celebrate this. Look what they do. Look what they do for the celebration. I couldn't believe it. I'm like, oh my God, this is like so ingrained in culture that but it's really all to do with a mushroom. You get the pun? The fun guy? It's hilarious. It's everywhere, okay? So Jan Arden has this new comedy out, and they have like these closed captions, and it's the mycorrhizal mushroom that looks like a penis on her show, on her first show. And she's singing her song on one of her scenes where it's about the body bliss, because you need to have a body bliss to ascend. Okay, it's everywhere. Once you know this story, you're going to see it everywhere. Even on Mario, he touches this mushroom and then he becomes a giant. He's no longer a little person, okay? Because it's like Alice in Wonderland. He changes size from this mushroom again. But it's like it's all in our culture everywhere, but it all relates to Santa Claus. So like I said, you don't want to be the hangman hanging from the tree. You want to be the star that gets the water. But this tarot deck, the star is a mushroom. And of course, it's number 17. I left breadcrumbs for myself. The dog is really God, and I have the mushroom on. I couldn't believe when I remembered this picture. I was like, I knew about the mushroom when I was that little kid. So I grabbed this from Robert Suffer's videos. So there are 3 baptisms. The first is spiritual, the second is by fire, and the third is by water. The 2 bulls in Egypt possess a mystery, the sun and the moon. Sophia received the universe from the day that she made the sun and the moon. She put a seal upon her heaven unto eternity. It is written concerning it that just man will blossom like a phoenix. And the phoenix first appears in the living state and dies and then rises again, being the sign of what has become apparent at the consumption of the age. So you want to be the phoenix. You want to be able to transcend. And I'm assuming all children will go to the fairyland like Peter Pan and Neverland. So it's the adults that have to do the work. It's the adults that have to get off the duality pillars and not hate the other side because they aren't awake. They're on their path. We're on our path. And the war between I'm right, you're wrong is just keeping you on the pillars, and you're not on the middle path, and you will not be in the right frame of mind to handle these energies. So for the next 2 months, I think we need to really focus on our ability to control our emotions, look after health measures. You can contact me. I have an Ascension guide with my website. You don't have to do a reading. I can just send you the guide if you want to learn about different things you can do for your body to prepare. I'll just keep, showing you the symbolism and also talk about some of the things we can do just to help. But the main thing is to just be happy. That's the whole thing. You have to be in a state of bliss state and have your left and right brain balanced to theta. So you need to be, balanced. It's all about Venus, which is Libra. Libra is balance, and Venus is the third eye. To open your third eye, you have to be in balance. Please share this video with as many people as you can so they have the opportunity to know the information. And if they just want to disregard it, that's fine. But I think there's enough evidence here to show that there's really something going on. Don't forget to wear your Corona Borealis crown at Christmas. And I'm going to leave you with this song from Sia called Santa is Coming for Us.
Singing to the deer in the sky, singing every jingle, jingle, jingle tonight, singing to the moon, set you free. Yeah, the angel and the